Hello, my name is Kai, and today we're going to be talking about the Liverpool versus Preston game. But before I begin, it'd be great if you guys could like the video, comment down below, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter. So immediately from the beginning of the game, what we noticed was Connor Bradley began to drift in and invert really high in the team. So initially he started from right back when Costas was in possession. But then if we go to the next panel, we can see that he's now moved forward as the ball goes to Trey and Yoni. And if we keep going, what we'll notice is that Connor continues to go forward, inverting further and further while Mo stays wide and Rio kind of shows for the ball. If we go even further, we now see that we kind of have this back three, and we have this build-up shape of 3-3-4. Now, I don't actually think this 3-3-4 build-up shape was intended. I think the goal is actually to go for a 3-2-5, which is why when we go to the next panel, what we immediately see is Connor goes even further forward, and we're slowly starting to see the makings of that until eventually we effectively see it. Now, there are a couple of nuances here. I think because it's Preston, you see players like Trey go further up, but what this could also be is maybe Arne is looking at a system where you have a 3-3-4 with one of the fullbacks pushing up. But in my ideal world, I think the reason why Costas is further back is because of the way that he plays. He wasn't particularly good in the final third, so you wouldn't want him pushed up. So instead, he's in the three, and Ryan is pushed further forward. So I think there's just like this cascading effect. I think in reality, you'd probably want some kind of 3-2-5 or 2-3-5 at all times. But as we look further into the game, we'll kind of see that that's more of the case. But it was interesting to see Mo very far wide and Connor inverting. You could really easily see how somebody like Jeremy Frimpong would be able to occupy this role. In fact, when we look at the pitch, there's a couple of things we can see. So in this situation, you get players like this, and Gamo is a little further wide. This looks more like a 3 here, Costas is here. Immediately to me, this looks very Bronckhorstian a little bit because you have somebody like Costas who's here with the intention of being in the final third at the end, but he kind of builds up towards the overlap, while Bradley is in this tavernier role and he's kind of just driving forward. You also have Szoboszlai, who is very high up because he is the 10, but it still effectively felt like a midfield 3, which is why I do think it would be odd to have Florian Wirtz in the position that Sabo was in. He'd probably be more comfortable in the Engamoa position, assuming Costas was a bit higher up, which you would then need Gomez to move over and Yoni to be more defensive. This felt more like something that we were doing to accommodate Costas in the team, more so than what Slot was trying to do, which looked more like probably this, in my opinion. And we can sort of see the ideas of Bronckhorst immediately taking their effect, because in this situation, this doesn't look too odd, except for the fact that my right back is starting to invert, and it looks like my pivot player is starting to move further out. As we keep going, wow, Ryan finds himself as the right back while Bradley is inverting inside, which some people might be like, oh, he's doing what Trent did, but this is very different because when Trent's inverting once he gets onto the ball. He looks like he's inverting to receive it. He's in this right half space all the way to the, front end of the pitch. But we see when Ryan inevitably gets past the ball and gets it, that Connor starts running, and Ryan finds Szoboszlai, who drops in, which is again a weird fit if you had Flo there, because you don't really want Flo to be this player who's dropping inside to pick up the ball and then laying it off. You would want that to be someone like Dom, which is again why I think he's going to be playing on the left for us. But we can see that Connor continues this channel run, something that Frimpong would be comfortable in. But this build-up tactic looks a lot like something that Giovanni von Bronckhorst would do at Rangers. And if we look back at the pitch here, what's sort of happening is a sequence where Ryan goes further out wide here. Bradley continues to run forward while the ball's getting passed out, with this effectively being the sequence that we're trying to run. Just to get Bradley the ball inevitably, who would then try to give it to Salah, continue his run, maybe receive it again, with the intention of eventually crossing to one of the on-rushing players, which, again, if you had a more attacking fullback instead of Costas, it would probably be something more like this. But again, because of the players that we had and the roles that we had, it made more sense for Inyoni to be there with Rio more wide, because Rio's more of an orthodox winger, so you want him on the far left-hand side. And we see the continuation of Bronckhorst's principles here. In this case, we have Rio end up getting the ball very high and wide. Again, Trey is kind of moving into this position. But we see once again that Connor is very narrow. This would be a position that you'd maybe expect Flo to be in more realistically. But again, Dom's defensive responsibilities mean it'd be difficult to see this all the time if he was there. But regardless, we have Rio out on the wing. As Rio comes inside, what we see is Kostas now starts to arrive and overlap the left-hand side. This was something that we saw with the Barisic-Tavernier dynamic at Rangers, where Tavernier would fly forward and Barisic would kind of build up his way to the overlapping position. This is something that we actually saw Kirkes do much more in the second half, which makes me think that this is the plan. But Kostas was doing it without really being involved in the play. I just think it's because he struggles a bit more in possession. That's a different conversation. And we can see as the ball continues to move in centrally that Kostas kind of finishes the overlap. One thing I think we're going to see with the left back, what we were saying with Kostas, is I think that we're going for, again, this Barisic-Tavernier dynamic where Kirkes might receive the ball immediately, pass it to somebody like Trey and Yoni, and sort of pass and move his way to being either on the overlap or potentially going on the underlap with the number 10, in this case, the left number 10, who could be either Florian Wirtz or Gakpo, sort of being in this overlapping position instead. Or you could see the 10 somehow drift over here and go on the outside, and the 10 in this case being Sabo, with then Wirtz being allowed to fully drift inside. I think there's a lot of good fluidity opportunities and a lot of good combinations. And I think the reason we maybe didn't see it as much and we saw Kostas do some deep build-up but then kind of drift his way to the final third in possession was because for Kostas, it's that he's not really good at doing this final third link-up play. He lingers on the ball for too long. He's not particularly good at it. All he really wants to do when he gets to the final third is cross, which is why I don't think we saw him build up that way. But I think Milos Kerkez is much more comfortable with that job in comparison. So when he is able to start and play in our best team, I think that is what we're going to see. Meanwhile, somebody like Jeremy Frimpong or Connor Bradley flies forward with Ryan Gravenberch sort of forming this back three as Kerkez finds his way pushing up. Now, the benefit of this is because we're not seeing Kerkez immediately fly forward and we're not seeing Tsimikas immediately fly forward, it does make me a little bit more comfortable with the possibility of Ryan being our 6 next season. Now, there's still some worries, obviously, where I don't think he particularly passed very well. We saw some signature turns from him where picks up the ball and then turns with Trey kind of acting more like the 6. And his ball carrying has never been something that we've really denied, but I would worry about him being the 6 if we need someone passing, because it forces Mo to be potentially the one who drops in and passes, and you don't really want Mo picking up the ball from that deep that often. Now, in the next sequence, the reason I included this singular panel is because this feels a lot like PSG's press when they kind of kick the ball away during kickoff, where a lot of players sort of just instantly man mark these positions in order to suffocate the team and get either an offensive throw in their half or just win the ball outright, which is effectively what we ended up doing in the next panel. But it is unique to see the amount of players who are effectively in this position. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players here. And if we go to the previous panel, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Normally you only see about 4 from Liverpool in this position. So it's clear that we're seeing a bit more of an aggressive press this season. I also briefly wanted to include this panel to show that we're still kind of going direct, because in this sequence, Mo ends up almost receiving the ball when he's really high and wide on the pitch. I think there's a chance that because we still don't have a real striker, that Mo is still going to be at some point the focal point for counterattacks. This is a good example of kind of seeing Mo as the conductor in this team. So what we immediately see is Ryan Gravenberch is on the ball. Now we're seeing something similar to the structure I was saying before, where you have 3 at the back. Sabo kind of picks up this reactive position, Mo's wide, inverted players. Kostas is much more inverted and closer here too. So we're seeing something that's closer to what I think slot ball will look like. But Ryan gives the ball to Szoboszlai. Dom's then looking to pass it again. Who does he give it to? He gives it to Connor, who then allows Dom to go on the inside, and now it looks like he's going on the outside. But because there isn't a whole lot of space, what we end up seeing Connor do instead is give the ball to Mo, and then try to make an overlapping run. You have these two passing targets for Mo, so of course he's going to use one of them. He uses Dom. But what we're seeing here is now Mo's deep, and he's sort of dictating play from deep. He's doing this right-handed side buildup that's allowing Connor to go high and wide on the right, and effectively going to allow him to come inside. Because Mo's pace is obviously declining, so how do you avoid that and still make him very useful? Well, you utilize his passing and awareness to get him into these better positions instead. Mo ends up receiving the ball and he looks to pass it again. He finds Ryan in space, and now it looks like Mo is 100% going into invert, while Dom goes on the outside here and Connor's allowed to come on the inside here. We're seeing Sabo really in this reactive position, and we're seeing both members of our pivot kind of fluidly go up and down. Like in this situation, it looks like Trey is our 6 and Ryan's our 8. That's a lot more similar to PSG too. There was a bit more fluidity in the midfield, and there's a similar argument to be made that we would do something just like that next season, which again doesn't really lend itself to wanting Flo to be this player. Could easily be here. Realistically, he'd probably be a little closer in with the fullback overlapping, but again, there's versatility. Of course, he can be wide and drift inside. And I keep bringing up Flo just because we didn't get to see him at all in this game, so it's just speculating as to what we're going to do. We see at the end of this sequence, though, that we have Dom here, and Mo is still just coming inside. And if Sabo did end up retaining the ball here, he didn't, it went out of play. I imagine we see Mo get closer and closer into the box and be in sort of a front two with Chiesa. So Mo in this conductor role was very interesting to watch, because you wouldn't really expect Mo to be sort of dropping deep and being the one dictating play, but I thought it's genuinely pretty interesting what potential combinations we could see this team have. So if your temporary back three looked like this, right? Kirkez hasn't gone forward yet. You have something like this. So if we think about this, what this allows you to do is Bradley runs forward, passes the ball to Mo. Ryan can then kind of step up as Bradley sort of runs forward. Mo gets multiple different passing options. He could find Bradley in space as he's running, assuming this guy doesn't lock in. He could also find Szoboszlai, who is then maybe able to turn and drive himself and find Bradley or Chiesa, or he's able to recycle it back to Ryan, or in our case, gives it to Mo, who can then give it to Gravenberch and progressively find his way inside. I like this as a way to get Mo central because it allows Mo to be ever present in every stage of buildup. This is something I would be more comfortable with Wirtz also doing on the left with him and Kirkez, because it's very difficult to mark and it ultimately still does get them in central positions, but it gives them so many different runners and players to pass it to. And because players like Wirtz and Mo are really good at passing from deep or in the final third, this dynamic would actually really fit both of them, because we never really saw Mo on the outside dribble, cut, and take on his man. We did see Rio do it, right? But when Rio was doing it, it's not like Rio had to run into all of this space and be like a pace merchant who was running to do it. He was just a good dribbler who was able to get past, and it's something that Wirtz could easily do. And it actually makes me much more comfortable with us even signing maybe Rodrigo to be on that side, because it looks like pace wasn't that important on the left, and I think that was mainly because the right back was so aggressive in these channels. So it does look like we're seeing the threat in behind fullbacks as a way to stretch the pitch and run in behind. So I'm looking at this game and I'm just going minute by minute, just analyzing. And another thing that really caught my eye is our pressing again, because this naively kind of looks like a 4-2-4, except for the fact that this is Trey and Chiesa's back here. But what you notice is that we're kind of just locking on to players. You got to lock on to this guy because he's currently on the ball, running very quickly. He tries to pass it out. Now Ryan tries to clamp onto this guy. He attempts to get it out and Ryan keeps going. He successfully gets it out, and now now Rio locks on. What's interesting about this is also very Bronckhorst-like. I'm starting to wonder if the plan was to have Bronckhorst from the end of the season, because this very much resembles his pressing drills that you can look up on YouTube, where players are very, very intensely locking on. This is much more similar to how Klopp pressed pre-Linders as well, of players sort of locking on to try to just win the ball in a way that seems very aggressive, but honestly isn't as risky because of the amount of players who are further back. Rio successfully gets the ball pushed all the way out, and now once again Dom continues this very aggressive press, and he forces the ball long. This is a really incredible press that didn't really lead to a turnover, and I would kind of blame Connor Bradley for that because he wasn't locking on to their left wing back very well, which was Small, who I thought was a really good player, Thierry Small. But it really does show that we're moving towards a much more aggressive yet very controlled press, and it looks like we have pressing triggers again, which we haven't really had since Mane and Gini left. So I think it's important to really illustrate what this pressing structure looks like. Before, when we were looking at the 4-2-4, it only looked like we were really pressing teams when they were in their own half. And once they got to our half, it felt sort of like a mid to low block where some players would maybe give chase, but it wasn't something that was consistently done. What we saw here is if a player had the ball in the center, someone like whoever the midfielder was would try to clamp down on them, force them to turn around, and now it's a pretty difficult situation on to who they pass to. They somehow get the ball here. Someone like Dom runs on, they pass it here, he clamps on, and now it goes back to the goalkeeper. But if he can't end up getting it and turning to the goalkeeper, he has to go long and attempt to find his winger. And if he succeeds, this fullback's here, forces him to go here. And eventually, you get into situations where now it's really hard to figure out who you give the ball to. You throw it in here, what if Mo intercepts? If he doesn't, you have to give it to your goalkeeper, who's probably going to get pressed by the striker. It's a much more aggressive press without having a massive amount of risk, because I always felt like there were a good number of players who were back, but players were just forced to work so much harder, which is a very Bronckhorst-like level of intensity. So I was making some jokes on Twitter saying that Arne Slot was like Johan Cruyff. The reason I was saying that is because I watched this sequence where it looks as if we're playing total football. It looks very positionless. The reason I say that is because Rio's sort of out here very far wide. You have your left back and your right back who are both running in, but Mo is now occupied this right 10 position when we're countering. But this isn't even the whole picture. When Mo's driving with the ball, he's got a lot of options. He's got two runners on the left and the right and a bunch of players around him. He ends up continuing to go inside. You get some more dynamic movement. Maybe Chiesa's going in here. Costas is going here. Maybe this is happening. But now, Mo is effectively on the left-hand side. This is now your only runner on the right. You have Chiesa here. Dom's really far back. In fact, he's behind both players in the pivot. And you're in a situation where Costas is going to try to play the ball. He ends up playing the ball to Rio, and now you have this sort of hybrid front three with your right back, and Mo is still very central. Rio kind of stalls here and cuts the ball back to Costas, who's, again, found himself really high up and on the left overlapping because he's in the Barisic role where he's building up to get on the outside, and Mo is still in this sort of left 10-ish position. He's sort of like on the left-hand side and in this weird left half space, somewhere where I'd actually really like to see Florian Wirtz operate if we can somehow make it happen. And you have Szoboszlai sort of in the right 10 position, and you have Connor Bradley really far up. But the fluidity is just insane because when the ball goes back to Trey and Yoni, he's able to play the ball over to Mo. Mo is then able to play the ball back to Rio. And the interchanges that we're seeing are insane. Like Chiesa's here, the Tavernier role of Connor Bradley's here. Szoboszlai is reacting to where Mo is, so he's taking up the position I'd expect Mo to be in here, which is sort of just on the edge of the box on the right with the freedom to run in here, maybe move step up here as someone like Connor runs in. Mo is sort of in the position that you would expect your 10 to be, like maybe Dom should be here. Rio's sort of in the position I'd expect Flo to be in more often, which is just sort of the ability to roam the entire left-hand side. You're overlapping fullback. Very, very positionless stuff. Like, we keep going. It's just the amount of people who are in the box here, which you have 6 people who are forward. This resembles a lot more of like a 3-1-6, where Ryan's sort of on the spearhead here, 6 here, 1 player here. It's a bit more of a 2, but I think that's just because it's Preston. And again, there's just more and more fluid combinations. You give it to Dom, right? Mo was here, and he's just able to run across. It's just so difficult to mark any of this. It's why Mo is just free on the right-hand side. And you give him the ball, and Mo is now able to link up with Dom, run inside, and have the freedom to run in here. Mo's conducting again. This cool overlapping run that finds him here. You could easily see Verts doing this on the left. It's just very difficult to mark, and it's like Barca-esque, it's Cruyffian, it's like total, it's pure total football. It was very positionless. And it was very interesting to watch because it resembles a lot of what PSG do, where you try to be very fluid in the final third to be very difficult to mark. And especially with teams like this who defend with a back five with then 3 players who are also defending. So it's almost like a bank of 8 with more people on the last line. When if you can drag people, eventually you can just create these little gaps. Like imagine you have a more intelligent footballer who's in this position here, you know, with Costas more here. I mean, you can see these situations if this was Kirkez and this was Verts instead, that it is just like the very fluid front 3, midfield 3 that we saw with PSG. So if anyone has their doubts about Slot wanting to emulate that team, I mean, just look at these sequences. It's very clear that that's what he's trying to do. I think this panel definitively shows what our build-up shape's going to be, because here I pretty obviously see the midfield 3. We've seen it a couple times at this point, and here you can really see it. Now in this game, it looked more like a 2-3-5, right? This is the best example of it. You have 5, 2 in the back, and 3 here. But if we go forward another panel, you can see that Ryan's kind of going deeper until you eventually sort of get what I see as a 3, 2, and a 5. Now, I think Costas is just dropping deep here to attempt to receive the ball, but you can very clearly see that that's the structure that we're going for. So I don't think we're going for the 2-2-4-2 with Mo being really high and central, because if we were, I think we would have seen it in this game. And yeah, I think it's more likely that that's the situation, and I'm perfectly fine with it. I had worries that it would see Mo be too far wide and you'd want him centrally. I had worries about filling the gap in the middle, but we're filling it by just having positional play. Like somebody ends up filling the gap and Mo is able to pass his way inside. So it looks like Slot is going for a much more fluid style of football than I would have thought, because he looked like a more rigid coach, but we're starting to see him coach in these patterns that we sort of saw at Feyenoord, but these are much more intricate and dynamic than even those could have dreamed of being. This was something fun that I saw because it sort of shows that Slot is trying to maintain, in at least this game, this 2-3-5 structure, because when Trey picks up the ball and is really deep, Luka just sees it as the opportunity to start driving into space, which he's comfortable in, right? He's played as a midfielder and as a right back and as a right wing back at Dundee. So it wasn't that weird to see him take up these positions, but here you can sort of see this 2/3 in this case with Costas being here. And we are still kind of seeing the makings of the 5 start to happen. And we'll see it by the end of the sequence because Luka attempts to overlap Mo. And here you very clearly see your 5, your 2, and your 3. With, in this case, Luka being the right back. It's very interesting to see, and it's kind of showed the fluidity even more because our center back roamed forward, which I think was just because it's Luka. But still, you can still see the structure and the ideas just continuing their way through this team. Like, we can see these ideas really being implemented. So this is the big sequence that led up to the goal, where we once again are sort of seeing this 2-3-5 forming, which saw Trey, drift in, like I've said before, because of how you want to utilize Costas' position. But again, we're still seeing the makings of this 2-3-5. Mo gets the ball. Once again, we're seeing Mo in the conductor role. We see Connor drift out further to the right because it looks like Mo wants to come inside. Mo gets the ball to Ryan. Mo receives the ball back from him, and Ryan ends up flicking it. Sabo ends up flicking it back. It gets to Luka, who then passes it back to Mo. So once again, throughout this whole sequence, what we're seeing is Mo has the ball. He's acting like the conductor, and he's progressing his way into the right half space with Connor much further high and wide on the right, with Sabo kind of occupying that central space that was vacated. Mo just continues to go wherever he wants, ends up getting it to Costas, who finds Rio. Rio's very far wide here again. This is more of an orthodox left-wing position, and something you should take with a grain of salt in this game is we don't truly know still how Slot wants to play, and maybe this is like a accommodation he did because Flo didn't play. But looking at the second half and seeing Gakpo's positioning, it looks like depending on the profiles that he has on the pitch, he's going to change who is where, but he's not really changing the system. It's always this 2-3-5/3-2-5. It just depends on who's there in those positions. But he gets the ball to Rio, who's able to get the ball to Chiesa, who's able to drive and do this great little cutback that fools everyone, that gets to Dom, who then finds Connor Bradley, which I think just sums up his entire positioning change, that he's this far high in the box, and it's really going to suit Frimpong. We didn't get to see Frimpong do much of this in the second half, which I saw a lot of people criticizing online, but I think the reason you didn't see Frimpong doing a lot of this is because that back four, compare this. In this game, in the first half, you have Costas, Joe Gomez, Lucas Stephenson, and Connor Bradley. You replace those two with Amaranalo and Robertson, someone who's not a center back and a very nervous young center back in Nalo. That's rough. It's really difficult to expect Frimpong to fly forward when he can't really trust his backline, because when you have that level of instability in your backline, you get worried. And people like Freddie Woodman, for example, too, is a worse goalkeeper than Mamardashvili. So you can expect Kirkez and Frimpong to be a bit more reserved when that's their sort of back three behind them. But the sequence ends up ending with Connor Bradley scoring his goal, and that's basically the end. The last little sequence I wanted to show is something from the second half. Again, there wasn't much to really analyze in the second half. It felt very odd. Even Louis Kumas's position was really high up, I just think, because he's more of a forward than a midfielder. There were a lot of really weird things that are difficult to analyze, because it just looked like, because of the players who were on the pitch, they had to defend in a certain way and they had to play in a certain way. Doak and Frimpong is a weird combination, because Doak doesn't really come on the inside to be this inside forward, and Frimpong couldn't really invert because there wasn't much space, because Darwin and Lewis were occupying the central positions too much. So it just felt very odd, but I wanted to include this panel because although Frimpong isn't an incredible defender, just an example of his recovery pace and being able to win the ball back sort of shows that in the system that we're intending to play, where we're going to face a lot of counterattacks because we're mostly going to be playing in a very settled, fluid, sort of really high up style of play, having someone like Frimpong who has that recovery pace is really useful, because we saw mistakes from players like Robertson, and we could see mistakes in the back line or in the midfield because of how high up we are. And just having Frimpong have the pace to get in front of certain players is really useful. And of course, pace isn't the most important thing in defending, but it is definitely still something that's very useful. And I'm really excited to see him play with better defenders around him on the 26th, which is our next preseason game. Alright, so that's it from me in this video. If you liked the video, please comment down below and subscribe to the channel, and also go ahead and follow me on Twitter. But before I let you go, I have a couple of things I want to talk about. First of all, I have 2 videos on Liverpool's Academy coming out this week. I'm going to have one talking about Rob Page and how Liverpool's Youth Academy may change under him, and another video talking about who we could potentially promote from the Academy, who we have either not seen much of last season or seen at all in preseason. I'm also going to have a video out on how Liverpool could emulate PSG next season and what we may see in preseason to show that. And finally, it would be great if you guys could comment down below what your thoughts are on the preseason game, what your thoughts are on my videos in general, what you'd like to see me talk about, or what you'd like to see me include in terms of visuals or animations or anything to keep the video more engaging and kind of grow my channel. But yeah, that's it from me in this video, and as always, thanks for watching.